In the gleaming halls of Apex Solutions, where innovation supposedly reigns supreme, Maya Richardson's footsteps echo with purpose. Her colleagues whisper about her Harvard degree, her brilliant mind, and the way their boss, Victor Whitman, seems to despise everything she represents. But what they don't know is that Maya isn't just fighting for respect. She's orchestrating a revolution that will shake the foundations of corporate America forever. Maya Richardson had always prided herself on maintaining grace under pressure. With a master's degree in business analytics and 5 years of experience at prestigious firms, she knew her worth. But nothing in her impressive career had prepared her for working under Victor Whitman at Apex Solutions. From her first day as senior data analyst, something felt off about the way Victor looked at her. His smiles never quite reached his eyes, and he had a habit of interrupting her during meetings, something she noticed he didn't do with other team members. Maya initially brushed it off as typical new employee growing pains, but as weeks turned into months, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Richardson, Victor would drawl during team meetings, deliberately avoiding using her first name, unlike he did with others. Perhaps you could explain this in simpler terms? Not everyone here attended those fancy schools you're so fond of mentioning. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. She mentioned her education exactly once during her introduction on day one. Yet Victor managed to bring it up every chance he got, always with that same condescending smirk. Sarah Chen, Maya's closest ally in the office, would shoot her sympathetic glances during these exchanges. A veteran programmer who had been with the company for 8 years, Sarah had seen managers come and go, but Victor was different. "He's getting worse," she whispered to Maya one day over coffee. "I've never seen him this openly hostile to anyone before." Maya's work spoke for itself. Her analysis had helped the company save millions in operational costs, and her quarterly reports were consistently praised by the executive team. Yet Victor seemed determined to find fault with everything she did. The tension came to a head during the annual department review meeting. Maya had spent weeks preparing a comprehensive presentation on implementing machine learning algorithms to optimize their supply chain. The conference room was packed with department heads and senior executives, including the CEO, Patricia Morrison. As Maya began her presentation, Victor's phone buzzed loudly. Instead of silencing it, he answered. "Sorry folks, gotta take this," he announced, speaking over Maya. "It's probably more important than listening to another one of Richardson's elaborate theories about how to run our business better." The room fell silent. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the podium, but her voice remained steady as she continued. Victor's interruption had been the last straw, but she wasn't about to let him see her crack. Not yet. She had been documenting everything, every snide comment, every interrupted presentation, every instance where he'd dismissed her ideas only to present them as his own, weeks later. Sarah and other colleagues had witnessed most of these incidents, and many had privately expressed their support. But Maya knew that support without action was just sympathy, and sympathy wouldn't change anything. What Victor didn't know was that Maya had been offered a position at their biggest competitor 3 months ago. She had initially declined, choosing to fight her battles where she stood. But she had kept the lines of communication open, building relationships and gathering intelligence about industry movements that would soon become very relevant. She also knew something that Victor didn't. His pet project, the one he'd been bragging about for months, was fundamentally flawed. Maya had discovered a critical error in his methodology, one that would cost the company millions if implemented. She had tried to point this out earlier, only to be dismissed with his usual condescending laugh. "Why don't you stick to your little data sets, Richardson? Leave the big picture thinking to those of us who've been in the industry longer than you've been alive." Maya had simply nodded and returned to her desk that day. But she hadn't been idle. She'd been preparing, gathering allies, and waiting for the perfect moment. The annual shareholders meeting was approaching, and Victor had been chosen to present his project to the board. Maya knew exactly what she was going to do, but timing would be everything. As she drove home that evening after the department review meeting, Maya's phone lit up with a text from Sarah. "Did you see Patricia's face when Victor pulled that phone stunt? She was not happy. Maybe it's time." Maya smiled as she thought about the sealed envelope in her desk drawer, containing documents that would change everything. Tomorrow would be interesting, but for now, she needed to prepare. After all, the best revenge required patience, precision, and most importantly, proof. In her apartment that evening, Maya reviewed her notes one final time. Her walls were covered with post-it notes and flowcharts, mapping out every possible scenario. She had learned long ago that in corporate America, being right wasn't enough. You had to be right in a way that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. Her phone buzzed again, this time with an email from Patricia Morrison's assistant, requesting a private meeting first thing tomorrow morning. Maya's heart raced as she read the message. This wasn't part of her plan, but maybe it could work to her advantage. She thought about Victor's smug face, about all the other talented people who might have been driven away by behavior like his, about the responsibility she felt to make sure this stopped here. As she prepared for bed, Maya remembered something her grandmother used to say. "Baby, when they go low, you go so high they need a telescope to see you." Tomorrow would test that wisdom in ways her grandmother probably never imagined. The night stretched before her, full of possibilities and plans. Maya knew sleep wouldn't come easily, but that was fine. She had preparations to make, and the morning would bring either her greatest professional triumph or her most public defeat. There would be no middle ground, not anymore. In her home office, she opened her laptop and began typing. If things went according to plan, Victor Whitman was about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating people. But first, she had to make sure every detail was perfect. After all, when you're about to change the game, you can't afford to leave anything to chance. The cursor blinked on her screen as she worked well into the night, each keystroke bringing her closer to what would surely be a day to remember at Apex Solutions. Dawn broke over the city skyline as Maya pulled into the executive parking garage at Apex Solutions. She had arrived 2 hours early, knowing she'd need time to center herself before the meeting with Patricia. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she made her way to her office, the sound echoing through the empty hallways. "You're here early," a voice called out. It was James from security, his friendly face creased with concern. "Everything okay, Ms. Richardson?" Maya managed a smile. "Just preparing for a big meeting, James, but thank you for asking." In her office, she booted up her computer and pulled out the envelope from her desk drawer. Inside were printouts of emails, screenshots of altered reports, and most damaging of all, a recording from last week's team meeting, where Victor had gone on a particularly offensive rant about diversity hires, while thinking Maya had already left the video call. At 7:45 a.m., Sarah appeared in her doorway, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Thought you might need this," she said, placing one on Maya's desk. "Word is Victor's been calling board members all morning. Something's got him spooked." Maya took a sip of the coffee, savoring its warmth. "How do you know that?" "His assistant Marcus texted me. Said Victor's been in since 6 a.m., which never happens. He's definitely nervous about something." Before Maya could respond, her phone buzzed with a message from Patricia's assistant. "Ms. Morrison would like to move the meeting up to 8:15 a.m. Please confirm if this works for you." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she typed her response. "That works perfectly, thank you." Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "Whatever happens in there, you've got this. And you've got more allies than you know." As Maya gathered her materials, she could hear Victor's booming voice coming from the break room. He was holding court with his usual group of yes-men, laughing about something. The sound made her stomach turn, but she kept her head high as she walked past. "Well, well, if it isn't our resident genius," Victor called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Off to dazzle someone with more of your brilliant insights?" Maya paused, turning slowly to face him. The break room fell silent as other employees watched the exchange. Victor's face held its usual smirk, but there was something else there too, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Actually, Mr. Whitman," Maya replied, her voice cool and professional, "I have a meeting with Patricia, but I'm sure we'll have plenty to discuss later." Victor's smirk faltered for just a moment. "Patricia? Since when are you on a first-name basis with the CEO?" "I guess we'll find out soon enough," Maya said, continuing toward the executive suite. As she walked away, she could hear Victor barking at his assistant to get Patricia's office on the phone, but Maya knew it was too late for that. The wheels were already in motion. Patricia's office was on the top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of the city. The CEO's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Regina, greeted Maya with a knowing look. "She's ready for you," Regina said, gesturing toward the massive oak doors. Inside, Patricia Morrison sat behind her desk, looking every bit the powerful executive in her tailored suit, but there was warmth in her eyes as she gestured for Maya to take a seat. "Ms. Richardson," Patricia began, "I believe we have quite a lot to discuss." Maya placed her envelope on the desk between them. "Yes, Ms. Morrison, we certainly do. But before we begin, there's something you should know about the Whitman initiative that's being presented to the board next week." Outside the office, the workday was beginning in earnest. Employees filtered in, coffee cups in hand, unaware that the company they would leave at 5 p.m. would be very different from the one they had walked into that morning. In the conference room down the hall, Victor was hurriedly reviewing his presentation notes, still confident in his position, still certain of his power. But power, as Maya knew, was about to change hands, and the morning was just beginning. Patricia's eyes widened as she reviewed the documents Maya had brought. For 45 minutes, they sat in silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of paper and Patricia's sharp intakes of breath. "These projections," Patricia finally said, tapping a spreadsheet with her manicured finger, "they're significantly different from what Victor presented last month. You're certain about these numbers?" "Absolutely," Maya replied, pulling up additional documentation on her tablet. "I've triple-checked everything. The algorithm Victor's team used has a fundamental flaw that only becomes apparent when you run extended projections. If we implement his system as planned, we're looking at a minimum $50 million loss within the first year alone." Patricia leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "And you brought this to Victor's attention?" "3 times, Maya said, sliding forward a series of dated emails. "Each time, he either dismissed my concerns or—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Made it clear that my input wasn't welcome." Just then, Regina's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Morrison, Mr. Whitman is quite insistent about speaking with you. He's waiting in the outer office." Patricia's lips curved into a slight smile. "Perfect timing. Send him in, Regina." Maya's heart raced as the door opened. Victor strode in, his usual confidence slightly fractured when he saw Maya already seated. "Patricia, I apologize for interrupting, but there's an urgent matter," Victor began. "Yes, there certainly is," Patricia cut him off, gesturing to a chair. "Please, sit down. Ms. Richardson was just walking me through some very interesting findings about your initiative." The color drained from Victor's face as he glanced at the document spread across Patricia's desk. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding," he said, forcing a laugh. "Richardson tends to overcomplicate things. As I've mentioned before, her academic background sometimes gets in the way of practical business applications." "Actually," a new voice said from the doorway, "her analysis is spot on." They turned to see Marcus, Victor's assistant, standing there with a stack of files. Behind him was Sarah, holding a laptop. "Marcus," Victor sputtered, "what are you doing here?" "Doing what I should have done months ago," Marcus replied, placing the files on Patricia's desk. "These are the original projections that Ms. Richardson sent to Mr. Whitman, along with his revised versions that were presented to the board. You'll notice some significant adjustments." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Adjustments?" "He altered the data," Sarah stepped forward, opening her laptop. "I've been tracking the changes in our version control system. Every time Maya submitted analysis showing problems with the initiative, Victor would modify the numbers before passing them up the chain. I have the complete audit trail here." Victor's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is ridiculous. You can't possibly believe—" "We also have this," Maya said quietly, playing the recording from last week's meeting. Victor's voice filled the room, his derogatory comments about diversity hires and quota fulfillment echoing off the walls. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia stood slowly, her expression stern. "Mr. Whitman, I suggest you return to your office and wait there. HR will be in touch shortly." She turned to Maya. "Ms. Richardson, I believe we have a board meeting to prepare for. I'd like you to present your findings personally." As Victor stormed out, Maya caught a glimpse of a growing crowd in the outer office. News traveled fast at Apex Solutions, and the morning's events had not gone unnoticed. But this wasn't over yet. Maya knew that exposing Victor's prejudice and incompetence was only the first step. The real challenge would be fixing the damage he had done, both to the company's projects and its people. Sarah caught her eye and gave a subtle nod. They both knew that what happened next would define not just Maya's career, but the culture of Apex Solutions for years to come. Regina appeared in the doorway again. "Ms. Morrison, the board members are calling in early. They'd like an explanation for the urgent meeting notification." Patricia gathered the documents from her desk. "Well, ladies and gentlemen, shall we go make history?" As they walked toward the conference room, Maya could feel the weight of every eye in the office on her. The whispers had already started, but she kept her head high. The next few hours would change everything, and she was ready. The board meeting room buzzed with tension as members filed in, both in person and virtually. 12 stern faces stared back at Maya as she set up her presentation, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed irritation at the sudden schedule change. "This better be worth disrupting our morning, Patricia," said Howard Blackwood, the longest-serving board member, his bow tie slightly askew as he adjusted his reading glasses. Maya caught sight of Victor hovering near the doorway, his face a mask of barely contained rage. 2 HR representatives flanked him, making it clear he wasn't to interfere. Still, his presence sent a chill down her spine. "Before we begin," Patricia addressed the board, "I want to make it clear that what you're about to hear represents a significant breach of trust and fiduciary responsibility. Ms. Richardson, please proceed." The next hour passed in a blur of numbers, charts, and gasps of disbelief as Maya methodically laid out her findings. She detailed not only the technical flaws in Victor's initiative, but also the pattern of deliberate data manipulation that had hidden these issues from the board. "In this scenario," Maya explained, pointing to a particularly damning graph, "the system failure rate increases exponentially after 6 months. The original data showed this clearly, but as you can see from these version controls, the numbers were artificially adjusted to show a success rate that simply isn't possible." "And you're absolutely certain about these projections?" asked Janet Chen, the newest board member, leaning forward with intense interest. "So certain that I'm willing to stake my professional reputation on it," Maya replied. "Furthermore, I've had 3 independent consulting firms verify my findings." She slid forward a stack of reports. "Their assessments are in these folders." A murmur rippled through the room as the documents were distributed. Victor shifted uncomfortably by the door, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "The cost of implementing this flawed system," Maya continued, pulling up a new slide, "would be catastrophic, but more importantly, it would disproportionately impact our smaller clients, many of whom are minority-owned businesses that Victor specifically marked as acceptable losses in his internal memos." The revelation hit the room like a thunderbolt. Howard Blackwood removed his glasses, rubbing his temples. "Patricia, is legal aware of this?" "They're reviewing everything as we speak," Patricia confirmed. "But there's more." Maya nodded, taking a deep breath. This was the moment she'd been preparing for. She clicked to the next slide, revealing a comprehensive alternative proposal, one that would not only fix the technical issues but also revolutionize how Apex Solutions approach client relationships. "What I'm about to show you isn't just a patch for our current problems," Maya began. "It's a complete reimagining of our service model, one that prioritizes equity, efficiency, and genuine client success." As she delved into the details of her proposal, Maya could see the board members' expressions shifting from shock to genuine interest. Even Howard Blackwood was nodding along, making detailed notes. But it was what happened next that no one in the room expected. Sarah suddenly burst through the door, her face flushed with urgency. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, looking directly at Maya, "but you need to see this immediately." She handed Maya a tablet displaying an internal company message board. Maya's eyes widened as she read the screen. In the 20 minutes since word had begun spreading about the meeting, something extraordinary had started happening throughout the company. Employees from every department were coming forward with their own stories and evidence. The floodgates had opened, and years of suppressed grievances were pouring out. But it wasn't just complaints. People were offering solutions, sharing ideas that had been previously dismissed, and rallying around the possibility of real change. The company was transforming in real time, and Maya stood at the center of the storm. But as she looked back at the board members awaiting her next words, she knew the real challenge was just beginning. The message board continued to flood with posts as Maya scanned through them. Technical staff sharing instances of ignored warnings about system vulnerabilities. Marketing executives revealing manipulated campaign data. Junior employees describing systematic suppression of innovative ideas. Each post strengthened her case, but more importantly, they revealed a pattern that went far beyond Victor's individual actions. "If I may," Maya addressed the board, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "What we're seeing here isn't just about one flawed initiative or one problematic manager. We're looking at a systemic issue that's been brewing under the surface for years." Howard Blackwood leaned forward, his bow tie now completely askew. "What exactly are you suggesting, Ms. Richardson?" "I'm suggesting that Victor Whitman isn't the disease. He's a symptom. And his project's failure isn't just a technical issue, it's a failure of culture." Victor made a sudden movement toward the podium, but the HR representatives quickly stepped in his path. His face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "This is absurd," he shouted. "You're all going to listen to some diversity hire who's barely been here a year? She's turning this into a witch hunt." The room fell silent. Maya felt every eye turn to her, waiting to see how she would respond to the outburst. This was the moment that would define everything, not just for her, but for every person who had ever been dismissed, overlooked, or silenced. She smiled. "Mr. Whitman," she said, her voice clear and controlled, "thank you for that perfect illustration of my point." She turned back to the board. "In the past hour, over 300 employees have come forward with similar experiences. But here's what's fascinating. They're not just complaining. They're offering solutions. Solutions that could have saved us millions if they'd been heard sooner." She pulled up a new set of slides she'd prepared the night before, just in case something like this happened. "These are just a few examples of ignored proposals from our staff over the past 2 years. Each one addresses a problem we're currently facing. Each one was dismissed without proper review, and each one came from employees who don't fit the traditional corporate mold." Patricia nodded slowly, a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. "You're not just here to expose problems. You have a proposal for fixing this." "I do," Maya confirmed, "but it's not my proposal alone." She gestured to Sarah, who had been quietly working on her laptop. "We've been developing this for months, gathering input from employees at every level. We call it the Phoenix Initiative." The screens around the room lit up with a comprehensive organizational restructuring plan. It wasn't just about diversity quotas or sensitivity training. It was a complete reimagining of how ideas flowed through the company, how decisions were made, and how innovation was fostered. "The problem isn't just that we've been ignoring good ideas," Maya explained. "It's that we've created a culture where only certain types of voices are heard. And in today's market, that's not just morally wrong. It's economically suicidal." Janet Chen was nodding vigorously. "These metrics, they're incredible. You're suggesting we could increase innovation output by 200% in the first year alone?" "Conservative estimate," Sarah chimed in. "Based on the suppressed ideas we've already documented, it could be much higher." Victor's laugh cut through the room like a razor. "This is ridiculous. You're talking about turning the entire company upside down based on some feel-good diversity propaganda." Maya turned to face him directly for the first time. "Actually, Mr. Whitman, I'm talking about saving this company from becoming obsolete, but please continue showing everyone exactly why we need this change." The tension in the room was electric. Board members were whispering among themselves. HR representatives were furiously taking notes, and somewhere in the building, hundreds of employees were watching their message board posts multiply, waiting to see what would happen next. But Maya wasn't finished. She had one more card to play, something she'd discovered during her late-night research that would change everything. As she prepared to reveal it, she caught Sarah's eye. Her friend gave her a subtle nod, confirming that everything was in place for what would come next. "Before I share this final piece of information," Maya began, her finger hovering over her laptop keyboard, "I want to make something clear. What I'm about to show you isn't just about Apex Solutions. It's about the future of corporate America itself." She pressed a key, and the screens filled with a complex web of connections: emails, financial records, and meeting minutes spanning the last 5 years. While investigating the flaws in Mr. Whitman's initiative, I discovered something much bigger. Our competitors aren't just waiting for us to fail, they're counting on it, and some of them have had inside help. Victor's face, which had been purple with rage, suddenly went pale. "Ms. Richardson," Howard Blackwood interrupted, "these are serious allegations. I hope you have concrete evidence." "Oh, she does," Sarah said, stepping forward. She connected her laptop to the display system, and new documents appeared alongside Maya's. We've been building this case for months. Every email, every deleted file, every private meeting, it's all here. The evidence was damning. Victor hadn't just been suppressing innovative ideas from diverse employees, he'd been secretly feeding them to competitors. But he hadn't acted alone. The web of conspiracy reached into several levels of management, revealing a coordinated effort to maintain the old guard's power at the expense of the company's future. This isn't just about discrimination, Maya continued. It's about systematic sabotage. Every time a fresh idea threatened the status quo, it wasn't just dismissed, it was stolen. And while we stagnated, our competitors thrived using our own innovations against us. Janet Chen leaned forward, her eyes sharp. The Miller account, she said slowly. The mysterious leak last quarter? Exactly, Maya nodded. But here's the interesting part. The ideas they stole. They only implemented the ones from their own traditional employees. They made the same mistakes we did, just with our stolen mediocrity. The room erupted in murmurs as board members pored over the evidence. Victor tried to step forward again, but this time, Patricia herself stood up. "Mr. Whitman, I suggest you sit down," she said, her voice steel. "Your time for speeches is over." But Maya wasn't done. She clicked to the next slide, revealing something that made even Patricia gasp. This morning, while everyone was focused on the board meeting, something remarkable happened in our company. When our employees started sharing their stories on the message board, they didn't just expose problems. They began solving them. In the past 2 hours alone, we've had more collaborative problem solving than in the past 6 months. She pulled up a live feed of the company's internal communication platform. Hundreds of employees were actively engaged, sharing ideas, building on each other's suggestions, breaking down the artificial barriers that had kept them isolated. "What you're seeing," Maya explained, "is the future of Apex Solutions, not divided by department, rank, or background, but united by innovation. And this is just the beginning." Sarah stepped forward again, her laptop displaying a new set of projections. "We've run the numbers. If we implement the Phoenix Initiative now, combining it with the organic collaboration we're seeing, we won't just recover from Victor's sabotage. We'll leap ahead of every competitor in our sector." The energy in the room had shifted. Even Howard Blackwood was sitting up straighter, his eyes bright with interest. But there was still more to come. Maya took a deep breath, preparing to reveal her final piece of evidence, something that would not only seal Victor's fate, but transform Apex Solutions forever. As she reached for her laptop, a notification popped up on her screen. What she saw made her pause, a small smile playing at her lips. The game was about to change in a way that no one, not even Sarah, had anticipated. The notification was from Marcus, Victor's former assistant. "Reuters is on line 3. They know." Maya's smile widened slightly as she looked at Victor, who was now obsessively checking his own phone, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He knew too. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Maya said, straightening her shoulders, "I believe you'll want to see this." She switched the main display to a live news feed. The headline made several board members audibly gasp. "Breaking: Major tech companies implicated in corporate espionage ring. Whistleblowers reveal systematic discrimination and data theft." "You see," Maya continued, her voice steady, "while we've been having this discussion, similar conversations have been happening in boardrooms across the country. The Phoenix Initiative isn't just an Apex Solutions project. It's a movement, and we're not the only ones who've had enough." Sarah stepped forward again, pulling up a series of emails on the screen. "Over the past 6 months, we've been in contact with employees at every major tech company in our sector. All of them had the same story: innovative ideas being suppressed, diverse voices being silenced, and valuable intellectual property being traded in a kind of old boys network." Victor lunged forward suddenly, his composure completely shattered. "You can't prove any of this. You're nothing but a—" "But we can prove it," Marcus interrupted, entering the room with a thick folder. "Every meeting, every phone call, every private club gathering where these deals were made. I kept records of everything, Mr. Whitman. Everything." The HR representatives moved closer to Victor as he slumped in his chair, his face ashen. Patricia stood up, her expression both stern and triumphant. "Ms. Richardson, I believe you mentioned something about market positioning?" Maya nodded, clicking to her next slide. While our competitors are about to face the biggest corporate scandal since Enron, we have an opportunity. The Phoenix Initiative isn't just about fixing internal problems. It's about leading the industry into a new era of genuine innovation. She pulled up a series of partnership proposals and preliminary contracts. In the past hour, we've received interest from over 24 companies who want to implement similar programs. They see the writing on the wall. The old way of doing business is dead. Howard Blackwood removed his glasses, cleaning them thoughtfully. And I assume you have a plan for managing this transition? Actually, Maya smiled, we all do. She gestured to Sarah, who unveiled a new platform on the main screen. Meet Phoenix Hub. While Victor and his friends were trading stolen ideas in country clubs, we built something better. A collaborative innovation platform that's already being used by over 10,000 employees across the industry. The platform displayed real-time interactions between engineers, designers, and managers from various companies, all working together on shared challenges. The old barriers of rank and background had disappeared, replaced by pure meritocracy of ideas. This isn't just corporate reform, Maya explained. It's evolution. And as of 8 minutes ago, we own the patent. The room erupted in excited discussion as board members realized the implications. Apex Solutions wouldn't just survive the coming storm. They would lead the revolution that caused it. But as Maya watched Victor being escorted from the room by security, she felt no triumph. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, progress, and the future of work itself. Sarah touched her arm gently. "They're ready," she whispered. Maya nodded, knowing what came next. Outside the boardroom, thousands of employees across the country were waiting for a signal. With one click, everything would change. Her finger hovered over the button that would activate the Phoenix Hub's global launch. In the moment before she pressed it, she caught Victor's final glance as he was led away. In his eyes, she saw something she'd never seen before: understanding. The revolution was about to begin. Maya pressed the button. Instantly, the screens around the boardroom lit up with a cascade of notifications. The Phoenix Hub was going live across hundreds of companies simultaneously, and the response was overwhelming. Within seconds, thousands of employees were logging in, their ideas and innovations flowing freely for the first time. "This is remarkable," Janet Chen breathed, watching the real-time collaboration unfold. "Look at these solution threads. Problems that have plagued the industry for years are being solved in minutes." But then, something unexpected happened. A red warning light began flashing on Maya's screen. "Sarah!" she called out, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Are you seeing this?" Sarah was already at her laptop, her expression focused. "Multiple unauthorized access attempts. Someone's trying to breach the system." Victor's laugh echoed from the doorway where he was still being detained. "You really thought we wouldn't have a backup plan? You're not the only ones who can write code, Richardson." Maya's mind raced. She had anticipated something like this, but the scale of the attack was massive. Whoever was behind it had serious resources. "They're targeting the authentication servers," Sarah reported, her voice tense. "If they break through, they could compromise the entire network." The board members watched in stunned silence as the battle played out on their screens. Years of corporate warfare had never prepared them for anything like this. But Maya remained calm. She pulled up a new window and began typing rapidly. "Sarah, remember that back door we discussed, the one we hoped we'd never need?" Sarah's eyes widened. "The Lazarus Protocol? But that would mean—" "Exactly," Maya nodded. "Sometimes you have to burn it all down to build it back stronger." She entered a complex sequence of commands. The screens flickered, and for a moment, everything went dark. Howard Blackwood stood up, his bow tie completely undone now. "What's happening? Have we lost everything?" Maya's voice was steady as the screen slowly came back to life. "No, Mr. Blackwood, we've just changed the game entirely." The Phoenix Hub reappeared, but it was different now. The interface had transformed, revealing layers of security and innovation that even Sarah hadn't known about. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya announced, "what you're seeing is the true Phoenix Initiative. While our attackers were focusing on breaching our front door, we've just activated a completely new architecture. One that doesn't just protect our network, it learns from every attack." The screens showed the attempted breach being not just repelled, but absorbed. Each line of malicious code was being transformed into a new security protocol, strengthening the system in real time. Victor's smirk had vanished completely. He stared at the screens in disbelief as his backup plan crumbled. But something else was happening too. Employees across the platform were responding to the attack in ways nobody had anticipated. Instead of panicking, they were adapting, collaborating, building new solutions on the fly. Patricia leaned forward, her eyes shining. "This isn't just a platform anymore, is it? It's a movement." Maya nodded. "The old system wasn't just broken, it was holding us back. What you're seeing now is what happens when you trust people to rise to a challenge." The message boards were flooding with ideas, each one building on the last. The attack had done exactly what Maya had hoped. It had united everyone against a common enemy. Sarah's laptop pinged with a new notification. She looked up at Maya, her expression a mix of awe and amusement. "You're not going to believe who just requested access to the platform." Maya glanced at the screen and allowed herself a small smile. The revolution wasn't just beginning, it was about to go nuclear. "It's the CEO of TechCore," Sarah announced, referring to their largest competitor. "And he's not alone. Every major tech company that was part of Victor's network is requesting emergency access." Maya stood before the board, her posture relaxed for the first time that day. "You see, while Victor and his friends were trading stolen ideas, we were building something far more valuable: trust. The Phoenix Hub isn't just secure from attacks. It's designed to turn competitors into collaborators." The screens showed a new wave of activity as companies began joining the platform, not as rivals, but as partners. The old barriers were falling, replaced by a new model of open innovation. Victor, still watching from the doorway, finally broke. "This is impossible! You can't just change everything overnight." Maya turned to him, her voice gentle but firm. "No, Mr. Whitman, we didn't change everything overnight. We've been changing it gradually, right under your nose. Every time you dismiss someone's idea, every time you mock someone's background, every time you chose pride over progress, you taught us patience and persistence and the power of working in the shadows until the moment was right." She faced the board again. "The question isn't whether this change is happening, it's whether Apex Solutions will lead it or follow." Howard Blackwood stood up, straightening his crooked bow tie one final time. "I believe we've seen everything we need to see. Ms. Richardson, on behalf of the board, I move to implement the Phoenix Initiative immediately and to appoint you as our new Chief Innovation Officer." The vote was unanimous. As the news spread through the company, cheers erupted from every floor. The message boards exploded with congratulations and new ideas. The revolution hadn't just succeeded, it had transformed into something even bigger than Maya had imagined. Victor was finally led away by security, his last shred of power gone. But as he passed Maya, she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Not hatred or anger, but recognition. He had finally understood what she had known all along. True power comes not from suppressing others, but from lifting them up. 1 month later, Maya stood on stage at the Global Tech Summit, addressing a room full of industry leaders. The Phoenix Initiative had spread to over 500 companies, generating billions in new revenue and thousands of breakthrough innovations. But more importantly, it had created a new kind of workplace, one where ideas were judged by their merit, not their source, where diversity wasn't just a quota to fill, but a competitive advantage to cultivate, where the next great innovation could come from anyone, anywhere. As she concluded her keynote speech, Maya shared the lesson she had learned from her confrontation with Victor. The greatest power we have is not the power to silence others, but the power to amplify their voices. In the end, pride comes not from being right, but from making things right. The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes, but Maya wasn't watching the crowd. Her eyes were on the young intern in the back row, taking detailed notes, her face bright with possibility. She saw herself in that young woman's determined expression, and she knew that the real revolution was just beginning. The old guard had taught her patience, persistence, and the importance of timing. But Maya had learned something far more valuable on her own. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, but transforming them into believers. And as she left the stage to thunderous applause, Maya Richardson smiled, knowing that somewhere, in another company, another person was facing their own Victor Whitman. But now, thanks to the Phoenix Initiative, they wouldn't have to face them alone. The world of corporate America would never be the same, and that was exactly the point.